So today I'm going to be talking about the Greeks from the Mediterranean world, the ancient Greeks. I'm doing this because of a test, so this is just my version of studying. I'm trying something new instead of writing things down because I'm lazy and I don't really want to do that today. So 1,000 years after the Egyptians emerged, that's when it all started, was on the island of Crete. And yeah, so the people who lived there were called the Minoans, and the Minoans, here, let me just check. Okay, so the Minoans, they lived from Crete, which is where all of it started. They had agricultural wealth, so like they didn't really care for much like trading items or money. They cared for trading like crops, and they they dealt with surplus agricultural goods. They were good navigators. They were the earliest civilization in Europe, 1900 BCE. They had writing, social organizations, and metalworking. So now I'm going to talk about the early Minoan period, which was about 2000 to 2100 BCE. So it was the introduction to the Bronze Age. They had to import copper and tin. They paid with surplus agricultural goods, as I mentioned before. But then their development was interrupted. The settlements were abandoned and the trading severed, and we don't know why. But anyways, that led to the Middle Minoan period, which was from 2100 BCE to 1700 BCE. So for some reason, they recovered from the unknown reason, but it was probably natural disasters or something. Like, the fall of most of all these ancient civilizations have been natural disasters or, like, raiding. But especially in this area, natural disasters like volcanoes and earthquakes is the main thing that you're gonna see here. But anyways, they recovered. There was a new population because of immigration. There was foreign trade. Sanctuaries were built to honor the gods, and they created a new system of writing, which was Linear A. They also, a part of their culture was lots of palaces, because the palaces were the centers of their political power in exchange for economy. They have impressive buildings with multiple levels and stories. The rooms surrounded courtyards at the center, and there was a main palace, which was Knossos. Now, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but I'm pretty sure I am. It was the largest and most important palace on Crete. It was destroyed, though, by earthquakes around 1750 BCE by earthquakes. Right? Oh, I just said that, yeah. Which led to the late Minoan period, which was 1700 to 1100 BCE. There was a volcano eruption, another one, at Thera. Now, I'm not sure where that is, actually. That was not mentioned a lot in my class. But Knossos was buried by ash, and the people had enough time to evacuate, at least. And then it was rediscovered in 1967, so not very long ago. They rebuilt virtually identical palaces, but they were all destroyed again, except Knossos, and it was likely by Mycenaean warriors in Crete. And those people, they created a new language called Linear B, just like in the Middle Minoan period when they created Linear A. But then Knossos was destroyed by fire, and it was never rebuilt again. So basically, Knossos was this really important palace. It was like their main center, and then it got destroyed by an earthquake. Then it got destroyed by a volcano. Then it got probably burnt by the Mycenaean warriors, but not sure. People of Crete had this story about the Minotaur. I'm sure that you've heard of the Minotaur and how King Minos' wife fell in love with a bull, a big white bull that was sent by as a gift for Poseidon, and then like they didn't sacrifice it or something, and then there was a curse that was put on the wife, and she fell in love with the bull, and she came up with a way to have relations with the bull, and then had a child with the bull, which created the Minotaur, which was this awful beast which they trapped in the labyrinth. Theseus was sent and killed the Minotaur, and there's all that. However, an important thing to know is that there is some connections to the story of the Minotaur and the Minoans, and that is that there is some links in their culture. It's really loved bull jumping and bulls, and the moment where the bull jumpers would fly over the horns of the bulls, it looked like they were becoming one, and so they think that that kind of inspired the myth, which is really cool. So there's some connections in bull riding and the myth. By the way, the palace of King Minos was Knossos, by the way. Just mentioning that because I did not mention that earlier. I'm going to talk about the Trojan War. The Trojan War is a very big chunk of this part of the Greeks' history, and there is actually some archaeological evidence that it actually happened, but they think that it's over trade routes between the Aegean Sea and the Black Sea, like who had control over those routes. But like that's just what scholars believe. Homer said that it was over the Queen of Sparta, Helen, and we're going to talk about that story because that story is much more interesting. Now, some backstory is that King Pelles and the Theseus sea nymph had a child. King Pelles was just a mortal, and the Theseus was a sea nymph, obviously, like I just said, and together they had Achilles. Now, this is not really related and probably will not be mentioned on my test, but Pelles catches Theseus asleep in a sea cave and binds her with every kind of noose and snare that he has, and he had to marry her because it prophesies that if Zeus or Poseidon married her, she would have a son greater than its father, and in Greek mythology, that is a very bad thing. Very bad things lead to that, like, for them, or that's just any, like, royalty in general. Like, you never want a son that's greater than you because that means that you're done. So basically Pelles and Thetis, they had Achilles. Now, that is just important for later. The backstory for this is that Athena, Hera, and Aphrodite were fighting over who was the most fairest, and they all offered stuff. Athena offered to be wise, Hera offered, I don't know, something I don't remember. Sorry, that's bad of me. And Aphrodite offered to give him the most beautiful woman, and the most beautiful woman happened to be Queen Helen. Now, Queen Helen of Sparta, and Queen Helen was said to be the most beautiful mortal. Very nice. So obviously, I meant chosen. I never put a backstory to that. So Paris, Prince Paris of Troy, was sent to settle this dispute between the three goddesses, and that's when they offered stuff to him. And obviously, being this awesome prince, he chose Aphrodite and got the most beautiful woman, and that caused a lot of war. The suitors for Helen and Menelaus, which was her husband, united with General Agamemnon to bring her back to Sparta with 1,000 ships. Like, this was a very big convoy to get her back. Achilles did not want to fight in this because he knew that he would die, but he went and hid as a woman on this island. Now, I forgot the name of the island, but it's this island that was like only for women and stuff, and so like why would he be there? But he was hiding there as a woman because he slays. Now, Odysseus also pretended to be crazy because he did not want to leave his sons, I believe. These are kind of unrelated, but they're interesting to know. Now, the battle. It lasted 10 years. There was periods of truce though to bury their dead, and there was no fighting after sunset. It was honorable until opportunity. Achilles did not want to fight, and he agreed to preserve his legacy, which obviously still worked because we're still talking about him. All this stuff happened, he ended up killing Hector, which sealed his fate. He ended up dying from an arrow to the heel, which is why you say, like, my Achilles heel, which means, like, my weakness. All that stuff happens in the Iliad, and then the next book follows that is the Odyssey by Homer. Now, the Odyssey started after the war. Odysseus was fighting the war, like I said. He did not want to go because of his sons, but then he ended up doing that. He's a very smart man, and he claims that he did not need help from the gods to help to win the war, which made Poseidon mad, which led to the Odyssey. The Odyssey is a story about how he was just basically another 10 years that it spent for him trying to get home. Now, he faced lots of issues in the water. Poseidon did not want him to go home. He made it as difficult as possible to get him home. He faced many things. That's the story where he rode under the back, and his men rode under the backs of sheep, hid from the Cyclops, like all that stuff. He even at one point like had a bag of wind that just. Now I'll get into some mythology before getting back into the real stuff. I'm better with like knowing mythology, but it's always good to review. So there was Olympians, and they overthrew the Titans. They were the offsprings of the Titans, but they overthrew them in a war called the Titanomachy, and they took control of the universe, and it was led by Zeus, the king of the gods. Boo! Now, they had I think there was 12 of them. So there was Aphrodite, Ares, Apollo, Artemis, Athena, Hephaestus, Hera, Hermes, Dionysus, Hestia, Poseidon, Zeus, and Hades. A very important thing to know about this unit is that there is the Greco-Persian Wars. So the Greco-Persian Wars happens next. Now, this happens because Cyrus the Great was on a mission to take over places, build his empire. He was doing a really good job, which is why his name is Cyrus the Great. He did lots of things. He was a good leader. He was of the Persians. Now, he had a son, Darius the Great, who continued his work, all that stuff. Now, Darius the Great had a son named Xerxes, and Xerxes is not so great. So basically, Cyrus and Darius, they could not take over Athens and the Greeks. They could not. They spread out everywhere, but they couldn't get that. Now, Xerxes came along and he's like, it's not good enough for me. I want to conquer Athens, I want to conquer the Greeks. This is what I want. Which led to the Greco-Persian Wars. Now, in the Greco-Persian Wars, there was the Battle of Marathon, there was Salamis. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's what it looks like to me, and that's what I've been calling it. There was the Battle of Plataea, and the Battle of Thermopylae. I don't know if that's in order, but all those happened, and I will be talking about those. So I was just guessing based off my class notes, but I actually got this very close in order, and I just felt like mentioning that because I was just guessing, and I did pretty good. Okay, so the first battle was the Battle of Marathon. Now, this was mostly fought between the Persian army and mostly the Athenian Greek army during this, and it was the first Greco-Persian War. This was fought on the beach, like shore, and the Athenians were outnumbered, but they were at an advantage because the way the land was. They were up here, and they were able to push the Persians back all the way. So the next battle was the Battle of Thermopylae. Now, what happened here was they wanted to go after the Athenians again. The Greek city-states were friends, and they actually fought often. They weren't together as one yet. So this was kind of a big thing. What happened was there was 300 Spartan warriors, and they went to fight against what's said to be 1 million Persian warriors. So what happened is that the Spartans had a little advantage again with the terrain because they found this little dip, and they would just take them off one by one. All the Spartans died, but they ended up killing off the Persians, and they all returned again. The Persians left again. Everything was saved. Next is the Salamis. I still don't know how to say that, but basically it was the biggest naval battle ever fought in the ancient world. The final battle of the Greco-Persian Wars. An alliance of the Greek city-states helped defeat them all, and it ended. So actually, so this is when Athens entered the Golden Age. I was mistaken earlier. After defeating Persia, Athens entered a golden age and became the cultural center of Greece. Because of this, Athens organized the Delian League, an alliance with 150 Greek city-states in the Aegean region. Sparta formed an opposing alliance with the neutral city-states, because Sparta was like, hey, we helped you so much, we're not getting any recognition. And this led to the fall of Athens in the Peloponnesian Wars. So these alliances, they started having wars. War broke out. It lasted 27 years. Sparta won and but then later fell to Thebes. Athens declined for almost 50 years after that. So the difference between them is that Sparta had land power, conservative mindsets, cared for self-protection, whereas Athens had sea power, they had radical democracy, they were seen as progressive, and they cared about expansion. Now, the Peloponnesian Wars broke out because Athens was accused of breaking the treaty when they excluded the Corinth and Megara from trade. Athens seemed the strongest at the beginning, and they had long walls connected to their seaport. During the attacks, people took refuge. However, there was a plague in 430 BCE. It was cramped, unsanitary conditions within Athens' walls. Within about 2 years, 1/3 of Athenians died, including Pericles. Pericles was the ruler, I'm pretty sure, at that time. The cause of the outbreak is unknown, but it's likely due to their conditions. So, during the 27 years, victories alternated, and there was a brief peace because leaders were killed around 421 BCE. Athens got a new leader, which was Alcibiades. I don't know how to say it. But basically, the new leader, one of them died to the plague, which I just mentioned. Outcome of war. Athens had to tear down their walls, surrender all but 12 ships, acknowledge Spartan leadership, and was ruled by the 30 tyrants. Lastly, I'll be talking about Alexander the Great. He is from Macedonia, which is seen as the backwards cousin of the Greeks. They are farmers and shepherds. They have lots of wealth and culture. So, manhood. It was defined by being able to hunt and kill a boar without a net, and killing an enemy in battle. You get to wear a belt as a reminder. There was Philip the Great. He was ruthless and ambitious. He created a professional army. He was an awesome military leader. He was assassinated at a wedding. He was the father of Alexander the Great, who is famous for perfecting the phalanx, which was a group of warriors who stood in a square with spears. Alexander the Great passed the manhood test at 16. He was a student of Aristotle. He ruled Macedonia at 20 years old. He was a successful military leader. He eliminated rivals to the throne. Alexander and Aristotle had a 20-year relationship. One dominated the mind and one dominated the sword. Alexander got angry, though. After his dad died, Thebes tried to rebel. He made an example of them by burning it to the ground and made them all slaves. He began to build his empire. He defeated the Persian Empire, gained Persian land and wealth, but he forced his army eastward into an 11-year campaign. He conquered all the way to the Indus River in India, although his troops were exhausted and they all convinced him to return home. They marched back to Babylon before he died, likely malaria, syphilis, or alcohol poisoning. He also was a heavy alcoholic. He died at 33 and was taken to Egypt to be buried in a golden coffin. Alexander is the reason Greek culture spread around the world. After he died, his empire was divided. There was no obvious heir to the throne, so the 3 generals took his place. Seleucus took Asia. The other one took Africa, which was Cleopatra's dad. I just don't know how to say his name. And Antigonus took Europe. And that is all. That concludes all of this.